Well, welcome all. It has struck one, and so we are going to get started with this information session for the University of Chicago Leadership and Society Initiative. We hold these each month, and we aim to hold them in an intimate and interactive setting. So we're going to be presenting a bit, and then we really do want to turn this into a conversation with all of you and make sure that we answer all of your individualized questions. Let me just start with a brief overview of what we're going to endeavor. There'll be a welcome from the 4 people who will be speaking with you. There's going to be a snapshot of LSI. You could see that as the why behind LSI. And then there's going to be an in-depth look at the learning journey. We'll briefly talk about selection, although we do have individual meetings for people who want direct candidacy counseling. And then we'll come to your questions, both as a group, if you have questions that you think are relevant to everyone. And we also have the opportunity at the end for Diane and I to break off individually with people if you have questions that you want to address, but they're particular and personal. And with that, let me welcome you. And I am going to start with the wrong slide. And somehow this is my fault, despite the fact that these LSI Fellows are constantly helping us get better. And Jeff pointed out that somehow the wrong slide was in here. I did not update the right way on this deck. So my apologies, and maybe that'll be something you hear about throughout. We have a great vision, and we've had incredible partnership with the LSI Fellows this year in realizing this vision, but it is not on screen. So I'm going to take down this for a moment, and I'm going to instead highlight them here on screen, and we'll introduce them that way. So Jeff, do you want to share who you are and your background and how you came to LSI? And then I'll invite Wendy and Diana to do the same.
Sure. Thanks, Seth. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Curtis. Obviously, as Seth mentioned, an LSI Fellow. I came from a nearly 30-year career in the healthcare communications space. I transitioned from my role post an acquisition in 2023, and LSI has been an amazing bridge from that transition to me finding out what is going to happen next.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Wendy, can you share next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. My name is Wendy Dubois, and I am from Chicago, though I've lived in different places over my life. I've been in both the private sector and the nonprofit sector. I started in business and business development and investor relations and made my way into different roles in the nonprofit sector. Most recently, I was with United Way of Metropolitan Chicago for quite a number of years, leading a big modernization effort and journey over there, and ultimately became the CEO. I was CEO there for 6 years, and also spent some time at the Aspen Institute. And for me, I knew when I left my role at United Way that I wanted to continue to work in social impact, but didn't want to do exactly what I had been doing for those years. So really wanted to actually go to a university and sort of have a university experience where I could really reimagine what that would be. And LSI has been that and been a great fit for me. It's great to be here.
And Diana, do you want to share who you are?
Hello, everyone. It's so fun to see all the different locations in the chat. So thank you for taking this time to join us. I'm Diana Petty. I have the true privilege of being the director of the Leadership and Society Initiative. I have been at the University of Chicago for just over 6 years, but I actually spent the lion's share of my career in and around city government. So I worked in New York City in the Bloomberg administration for many years, doing civic tech initiatives and public-private partnership building, and a stint of capacity building with human services nonprofits. And it was actually while I was in New York that I was extremely fortunate to get involved in several civic sector leadership development programs. And one in particular was out of the NYU Wagner School of Public Policy. And that got me really excited about the role that academic institutions and higher education can play in activating talent and leadership in service of society and in social impact in particular. And so a lot of the work I have done in that space has been with people who are just starting their career journeys. So when I saw this opportunity to work with distinguished leaders and individuals who arguably are at or nearing the peak of their wisdom, I jumped at it, and it truly animates me. And it's been absolutely an incredible experience to get to work with Jeff and Wendy and their fellow fellows this past year, and looking forward to only growing that in our future years. So looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you, Diana. And I'm now sharing the screen again because we have corrected the issues on it. And I am going to give the final introduction. I'm Seth Green. I'm the Dean of the University of Chicago Graham School. And I have the joy of being the decanal sponsor of the Leadership and Society Initiative. It's a university-wide endeavor. We have many schools and divisions that are collaborating, but we are very proud at the Graham School to be the operational home and to have the amazing Diana Petty and her team on our bigger team at Graham. And just briefly, my background, because it really relates to this focus within LSI, is that I was in the private sector for a number of years at McKinsey & Company. I then jumped out and led a nonprofit, and I remember well that transition, how to think about bringing skills from one sector to another, and then came into higher education about a decade ago, first as an adjunct lecturer, just on the side of my work leading this nonprofit, and then full-time leading an academic center on social impact, and then coming over to the incredible world of lifelong learning here at the University of Chicago, and really thinking deeply about how do we integrate that with the goals around impact and legacy that so many people feel. And one of the reasons that we thought LSI was so important is that we were already being inundated by people who were saying, I really want to continue my journey. I don't see this as moving away from an impactful life. I see it as moving even more into an impactful life, but I want an intellectual partner in that endeavor. And so having been in many of those conversations, it is an utter joy now to have an initiative at the university and a pathway where we can really make that come true. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start with a bit of a snapshot. And once I offer that why behind LSI, I'm going to then come back to Jeff, Wendy, and Diana for their reflections on that based on their unique lenses as fellows and the director of the initiative. So you likely have caught on to this if you're in this virtual room. LSI specifically supports distinguished leaders, people who have extraordinary accomplishment in the private sector like Jeff and in the social and nonprofit sectors like Wendy, and who want to design really meaningful next chapters for themselves and for society. And there really were two thematic backgrounds that led us to this initiative. The first is that people are living longer. And as longevity is increasing, but most people are still reaching the end of a long-standing career around the same time, it means we're opening up a whole new window of opportunity. And one of the favorite books I've read on this topic by Mary Catherine Bates says, it doesn't just change old age if we're living longer, it changes every chapter of life because it changes the whole life cycle. And with that thought in mind, we really put a lot of emphasis on how do we create opportunities, not just at the undergraduate level and the graduate level, but throughout life to be able to come back, discern, and then launch our talents in new directions. And as we live longer, obviously the opportunity to do so deeply and to launch in entirely new directions becomes much greater. So that's context one. Context two is that a lot of the issues that we look at as a society today are more complex and require broader and deeper leadership than ever before. Think climate change, think economic inequity, think about the war and peace issues that are right now, really shaping our international relations. And when you think about those issues, we really need individuals who have led at the highest level and who can bring those distinctive leadership capabilities to bear on these important societal challenges. And so we really need, especially in a world where the population in developed countries is actually getting smaller at younger ages rather than bigger, we really need to activate the full talent pool, especially those with these leadership capabilities. And so what LSI is specifically aiming to do is it's aiming to activate a group of leaders that have these talents for society and to support these individuals in their purpose journeys. And the belief is that this is mutually reinforcing, because at the time where people are living longer than ever and issues are more complex than ever, there is a very special role that individuals who have led at the highest levels can play in society. And we want to essentially unleash that role through a partnership with fellows that allows them to design and then activate the fullest possible next chapters. And just to say where this journey ends, and then I promise after this, we're going to fill in the actual journey itself. You start as someone who has distinguishment and a passion for developing an ambitious next chapter. You end the LSI journey with what we call a purpose plan. And it's basically your why, your vision, your mission, your values, what really motivates you, your how, the scholarly analysis that really tells how you can have impact on that issue, and then your what, the specific roles, applications, and partnerships you intend to take on, whether it's a portfolio life with different board leadership roles, or you want to start up something, or you may even want a career shift. That allows you to really have the impact in that next chapter that you're seeking. And I'll close before coming over to Jeff, Wendy, and Diana by saying that all of this takes place in community, because we believe that you are essentially moving from one identity, purpose, and community to another at this stage of life. And so we have found to date that that is not easy to do by oneself, and that it is best done in a community of people where there are different lived experiences and different ways of thinking about this next chapter. And you can compare notes and take real comfort and criticality from each other to build that next chapter in a way that is distinctive to you, but in community with others. So with that, I'm going to take down my screen again, because I want you to see our discussants. And I'm going to start, Jeff and Wendy, with both of you, who are currently finalizing your purpose plans. Can each of you give the kind of 60 version snapshot of your current plan visions? And might you even share a little bit about how LSI has shaped your thinking about your purpose plan? And Wendy, I'm seeing you lean in, so can we start with you on this one?
Brilliant. So I came to LSI, as I had said before, knowing I really wanted to reimagine, but I did come in with kind of a hypothesis. I have been spending a couple of years since I was at United Way getting very involved with different organizations and different initiatives that are working to reduce violence in community in the city of Chicago. And so I sort of came in with that as a hypothesis, and I would say through the LSI journey have not only assured myself that I'm on the right path, but found a very specific way I want to work on it. And what that is, sort of combining my background in philanthropy and in looking at creating different social impact initiatives. I was able to figure out that the funding right now for this field is a little early in the game, let's say, and that it would be very useful to create, I believe, an innovation engine funding accelerator for the field of violence reduction. And so that's actually the purpose plan that I have set out, and am progressing along that plan, figuring out how to launch that and what's involved and what's needed and so on. And I would say it's very exciting. And I think there are a couple of very specific ways that I can tie the LSI experience to that journey of figuring that out. And the first I would say is just an interesting conversation that we had in the wintertime with David Brooks, where he was really encouraging us to think about issues to sort of, I know how an issue or a project that you want to work on is really the right call for you, let's say. And he sort of took us through ways that he looks at it, and it really resonated with me. He talked about, finding an issue that not only is a really big issue, but one that keeps you up at night, and one that you sort of feel like you've been walking towards your whole life. And so when I thought about it that way, I said, yeah, I think this is the right issue or call for me. And then I would say another specific thing that happened is, because I had this hypothesis going in, one of the first audit classes that I took at LSI in the fall quarter was a crime prevention class taught by Jens Ludwig, who is an amazing professor who leads the crime lab at the University of Chicago. And it was really in the experience of taking his class that I kind of crystallized the idea of what an innovation center and funding accelerator could really add to the field. And then I would just finally add that he has now become my academic advisor for the LSI program. And I have a mentor who is the former head of MacArthur Foundation. And between the two of them as advisors, I feel like I sort of have a kitchen cabinet that is working on this issue. And that's been enormously helpful to evolve it and figure out how to shape it and plan it.
Thank you, Wendy. And Jeff, do you want to share how your purpose plan has taken shape and how LSI has shaped it?
Absolutely. Similar to Wendy, I came in with a very broad concept. I am very passionate about education access and equity, and came into LSI thinking that I was going to do something related to whatever that may look like from an access and equity standpoint. And then I completely pivoted. And it's still education adjacent, but it was a pivot that was prompted not only by conversations with Seth and Diana, conversations with fellows, conversations with mentors and others in the community that got me to the point where I'm at now. And I want to underline that point, because the resources that exist within the community that is being built by LSI are real. And without that input, I don't know if I would be going the direction that I'm going right now. And that is that didn't set out to build anything or start anything, but I'm building something and starting something, and specifically focusing on my expertise in the communications industry and how I can further diversify the field. Similar to other fields, the public relations and communications industry has a diversity issue and has an advancement issue. Diversity is not reflective of current population demographics nor workforce demographics. And I know that I can't fix this with what I'm building, but I know that I can be a part of the solution. So the model right now is more direct and deliberate placement via internships for first-gen diverse students at colleges and universities, and really those not necessarily top tier university, but those second and third tier universities that do have robust communications programs and diverse programs, but lack those access issues, social capital issues, and obstacles to getting those meaningful internships. Second, I also mentioned advancement, and the advancement issue is becoming more of an epidemic now. Statistically, only 26% of people promoted within the communications and public relations industry in 2022 were diverse. Again, not really reflective of population and workforce demographics. And so what I'm trying to set out to do is help to repair those broken ladder rungs once diverse employees get into the entry-level ranks. How are they advancing, and how can I help based on what I have and what I am doing, help them advance in an appropriate way? So it's exciting for me. I'm passionate about the communications field. I'm passionate about doing this. And again, it was all of those nudges and conversations that I had with the folks that I mentioned that really got me to that point, to leverage the strengths that I had in the industry that I had to make this real. And it's become a lot more real, a lot more quickly than I thought it would. And again, that's very exciting. And I'll end on one thing, also David Brooks related, because I think Wendy at that same dinner, he said, if you're setting out to do something, make sure it's big and it's a big idea. And that was scary when he said that. But you step back and look at what you're building and say, why not? This is a very big idea. You're building something new. Why not? And I'm confident in the support that exists with, again, not only Seth and Diane, but the fellows and the mentors and the community within LSI, that I'm going to be able to get this done.
Well, those are two really inspiring examples. And Diana, you are working with 20 inspiring fellows. Can you just talk a little bit about the diversity overall of the types of purpose plans that fellows are coming forward with?
Yeah, I'll add to Jeff and Wendy's invocation of David Brooks with just one of the other frameworks that he offered that has kind of stuck with me as we've been watching the progression across the cohort, which is he pulled in a theologian, Frederick Buechner, who describes that you can kind of, one way of knowing your vocational calling is where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need. And for me, like as I've been watching across the cohort, when I think about it like that, it acknowledges how deeply personal this kind of journey can really be. And in your definition of happiness and gladness and your definition of the world's deep need is very subjective. And I think that's what we're seeing, across the cohort. Everyone is moving forward with a deep degree of intention, of passion, of real commitment to serving and to leaving the world better than they found it. But it's manifesting in a real continuum. And I think that's also a testament to the 3-part learning journey, which Seth will share a little bit more about. But there's knowing oneself, understanding the world, and envisioning the future. And I think a large number, or not a large number, like a part of the cohort is sort of taking a more inside out approach to their purpose plans, and really through this journey has kind of reconnected with what animates them and what energizes them and what really feels enriching and meaningful. And they're using that to position themselves to be best footed, to be as impactful leaders as they can be. So we're seeing a good number of fellows coming out thinking about teaching, about being conveners in their neighborhoods, about writing and thought leadership so that their kind of expertise can reach a wider audience. But it's because they realized that teaching made them excited to get up every morning, that they really thought that they could reach students in a really impactful way. And then on the other end of the continuum, we have people who are deeply connected. I think you just heard Jeff and Wendy speak so beautifully about this. We have many fellows who are deeply connected to an issue that is concerning to them, and they're finding a real calling and kind of rising to the moment in history that we find ourselves in on some of these extremely complex needs. And so people thinking about systems issues, people thinking about, violence reduction, educational reform, really big things. But that continuum, I would say, within the cohort of purpose plans has been really generative to have people thinking about what living and leading with purpose looks like at this stage. So it's been a real gift. And, I think we all feel bittersweet that there's only 5 weeks left of this inaugural year.
One more question for you before we jump into the journey, and maybe we'll make this power round, your kind of quick reflections. The cohort plays a big role in really shaping this experience. Diana, can you just talk about how we compose the cohort in terms of the types of individuals that we bring together? And then Jeff and Wendy will just come to you for quick shots on how it's been a part of your experience. Diana, you first.
Yeah, so I'll say that there's sort of 3 unifying characteristics of how we built the LSI cohort. So the first is that they're distinguished leaders, right? But that they come from a variety of different vantage points, contexts, perspectives, and lived experiences. But as Seth mentioned earlier, they all are people who have operated at very high levels from whatever trajectory they came to us from. The other is that they're in a moment of transition of some kind. I would say, again, within a 20-person group, the variation across stage of transition, it ranges, but that again has been really powerful to have people kind of thinking about making different types of leaps in different ways. And then the type of chapter and lifestyle that they're building out at this moment also varies, but they're all at an inflection point. And then finally, they came to us, I would say with a degree of humility, that they wanted to embrace a learning process. They wanted to embrace not only the opportunity to leverage the rich resources of a place like the University of Chicago, but also being with each other and being able to learn from people who would ask very different questions than they would and come to very different answers. And so those, I would say, are the things that unify the group, but they are distinct from almost every other measure. And so that has been wonderful. The cohort does roughly represent kind of the full picture of the economy. So about 60% comes out of the private sector, including finance, real estate, media, advertising. and tech, but then we also have a small but mighty civic sector contingent, including folks like Wendy, who have run large-scale nonprofits, people who have been in the foundation and philanthropic space, former academics, and also practicing doctors and physicians. So that range, again, of kind of leadership experience and insight has, I think, been extremely constructive, and it's allowed each individual to accelerate their own learning process. But Wendy and Jeff can share more.
Yeah, I think simply put, I couldn't have assembled a better think tank if I would have tried. And that's exactly what this group has been. And I alluded to it in my previous remarks about just even nudges and feedbacks that I've received from a purpose plan standpoint, but the challenging, the camaraderie, the conversation has just been fantastic. And we've all grown so close over the last 7-8 months that it has become, to me, just a big think tank that you can take anything to and get a balanced but directed answer from anyone.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, the think tank is a great analogy. I mean, the first thing I would say is the group is really bonded, is the word I'm going to use. And I knew that going in, it was probably going to become a tight group, but even more than I would have ever expected. And I think it's because you are on a journey together, and this journey is filled with so many different and interesting experiences that you get to experience together, that the group is very tight knit. And I think there's different levels of, in the group, we're in courses together, we're having a lot of daily discussions. So I think you get a lot of support from the group, encouragement from the group, pushback in a great way from the group. I've watched the group, I think everybody sort of progress in some way with their journey, their ideas. And then we have you have small study groups, and that's also been a subgroup of the cohort that I think has been very, very helpful. And that group in particular, I would say one of the things that we've done for each other is not only push the thinking and push the evolution, of the journey that we're each on, but hold each other accountable. And that's been good. And then I think, like Jeff was saying, that this idea of a think tank, there's a lot of individuals in the cohort. I'm doing this. I think everybody's doing this in different ways, just bouncing ideas off of each other one-on-one. And, hey, a lot about investment cases, come help me with mine. Hey, a lot about this industry or this market, come help me with what I'm thinking. What am I missing? It's so it is kind of a think tank for each other.
Well, I'm going to get us started again with the slides, and we're going to go through the LSI journey. As we do so, I'm going to be brief, but that's because I'm going to come back to Jeff, Wendy, and Diana again for their reflections on this journey. So there's a 3-part journey that you go through in LSI. The first is knowing oneself. And what we are intending is an opportunity for you to really reflect on your life, the values that have guided it, and importantly, what matters to you now going forward. Because one of the changes that we often talk about in LSI is that at this moment, you're typically going from an external locus of incentive, meaning that you've had a career with usually a pretty strict accountability framework. So even if you went into your career with a deep passion, there was still, in Wendy's case, a role that you have to play as CEO of United Way, and a P&L you have to meet, and a set of requirements that really structure what you're doing, that almost take a lead in your thinking about, what am I waking up to do every day? And so this is often a moment where people are taking a step back, and even though they've been guided by their goals and values, they really want to look at them again and deeply think about, okay, looking forward, typically where I have even more freedom, what are those core values that motivate me? And how do I raise those potentially even higher in my thinking as I develop that next chapter? And so knowing oneself is the foundation on which we try to build everything else. The second is understanding the world. And again, to come back to Diana's analogy of where your gladness meets a real need in the world, the first part is that values, what motivates you. The second part is, what are those issues in the world? And this is a really special part of the curriculum, and we'll give you a glimpse into it in a moment, where you're looking from different lenses. So an economist lens, a sociologist lens, a policy lens at the same issue. So Wendy mentioned crime. For example, Jens Ludwig, who's an economist, will look at the data and he'll say, okay, if you increase prosecution, crime goes down. Then we'll have a sociologist here at the university. Reuben Jonathan Miller is a prize-winning member of the School of Social Work, and he's written a book, Halfway Home, that looks kind of qualitatively at what happens in vicious cycles of recidivism, where you begin prosecuting and putting people in jail, and then it cycles within families and generations. And they may not have the same view. An economist and a sociologist may disagree vehemently on how to address this issue. And you may know the University of Chicago is very proud. We are a place of free expression and critical thinking. And we do not tell people right and wrong answers. We help people to think more deeply and rigorously about ideas. And that's exactly what we're trying to do and understand the world. Give you many different frameworks and allow you to think about which one aligns with you, but also prepare you for the possibility of collaboration in the next stage of your career. For example, if you've come from the private sector, most of the time you've been using an economist or a business framework for how to think about an issue. So you may really care about crime or about diversity. And then you may come in and you may think, oh, there's one way to handle this. And it may be that even at the end of LSI, you still see that as the way that you believe would be the most effective. But if you've taken a sociologist and a policy perspective and all these others, then when you get in that room and you often need to collaborate on these issues in order to move something forward, I understand this person who's saying they maybe are against prosecution or they are, for this type of approach, they're not thinking about it wrong. They're thinking about it differently. And maybe they're using a sociologist framework and maybe we can find a common ground. So it's this incredible curriculum that allows you to see issues in the world that matter from many different perspectives. You'll ultimately come to a perspective of your own. And in most cases, people don't move entirely their perspective. So it's not that we anticipate you coming and suddenly having an awakening and now saying, oh, I see all the world through this other framework. But what it will do is it will give you real insight into other ways of thinking. It will make you more possible to bring those into your own approach. And it will make you more ready for collaboration with humility, typically across disciplinary ways of looking at the world. The final piece is envisioning the future. And this is where you bring together that gladness and the need and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And in this curriculum, it's all taught by practitioners, people that are out in the world that are putting these frameworks into action, people that have at the highest levels been able to think about board leadership, whether corporate and or nonprofit, people that think about strategic philanthropy, that think about careers in the sector, that think about the structure of effective impact organizations. And so rather than just give you those kind of tidbits, let me show you the actual courses, because each of these values, know oneself, has a corollary course that you take each quarter. And so you'll see there the names of the courses: Frameworks for Reflection, Lenses for Investigation, and Pathways to Impact. And here are the actual faculty that are teaching in these courses. So in the Know Oneself, you start, for example, with leadership and purpose. And in each of these, we're trying to give you two complementary perspectives. So Harry Davis is at Booth and David Ray is in the classics. And they actually met with one another a lot to talk about how they approach leadership and purpose, and then sat in on each other's classes in part. And Harry takes, from a business school framework, a very reflective look at how executives reflect on their time. David looks at how people across time and space, from Marcus Aurelius to the Gaudiya, have answered these questions. And he brings in that wisdom from across time. And that then goes into a winter where you look at the practice of wisdom. And then right now, David Brooks and Ann Snyder are in residence here in Hyde Park for the Schmoll Spring Quarter, teaching about the big questions. You'll see a similar approach here in understanding the world, where, as I mentioned, we're getting people from the Booth School, but we're also getting people from sociology, from the Crown School, from the Harris School, and we're trying to look at issues from many different perspectives and give you a new set of frameworks for looking at issues that you might be very passionate about. And then finally, these are all practitioners. These are people that are operating at the highest levels. And so For example, the board leadership class is taught by someone who has chaired a number of global Fortune 500 company boards, and a person who's her partner in the endeavor, who is actually the leader of the CEO and board practice at a large executive search firm. Alongside the core curriculum, those 3 courses you take each quarter, they're audited courses. That's your opportunity to audit 2 courses anywhere in the university each quarter that give you a chance to double down on the issues that you're interested in. So Wendy mentioned, for example, she's passionate about how we address violence, and so she's taking courses specifically on that topic on her own initiative within the university. Each quarter, we also have immersion days where you can go deep into a societal issue that the cohort has deemed to be important. So we did some surveying as this first cohort came in. We noticed that democracy and disinformation and AI and ethical considerations and sustainable urbanism were 3 topics that really resonated, where we had great networks. And so we built 2-day deep dives where the fellows, in partnership with scholars, in partnership with practitioners, could spend a kind of consortium-like time around that topic. There's travel studies. So this group went for a year to London. Next year's cohort will go to Paris, and we'll look at issues related to health and longevity. They have outpaced us by about 6 years on life expectancy now, and they spend half as much on healthcare. So we thought there might be something we could learn about their example. And then alongside all of this, we're grateful to be partners with the Aspen Institute, and they have a leadership, purpose, and values executive seminar that they run for the fellows during the orientation that really allows fellows to connect over great texts on a curriculum that is tailored just for the LSI community. And alongside that deep set of coursework and experiences, we have 3 advisors, an executive coach who helps each of you with thinking about the planning and execution of that next chapter. Do you want to serve on a corporate board? How do you get your corporate bio ready? An academic advisor who helps you to deeply investigate the societal issue and to write a lot of your purpose plan. And a mentor who you can think of as someone who has made this transition. They made their change from their longstanding career to their next chapter about 5 to 10 years ago. And they're there to offer their lived experience and give you feedback from that perspective. And where this ends, as we talked about earlier, is in that purpose plan: why, what, and how. And these are a few of the plans, and Diana described them brilliantly earlier, that range from inside out to outside in. So that's the journey. I'm going to come back to Jeff, Wendy, and Diana, and then we're going to come to your questions very quickly after. Jeff and Wendy, let me start with you. I'd love to briefly get your perspectives on the elements that I just described. Can you talk about what it is like to be back in class and how you and your cohort are approaching both the core classes and the audited classes to get us started? And Wendy, I see you off mute, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, so it's been great to be back in class. It's hard work. It's a lot of reading, but I have found it exhilarating. And I think just the core curriculum that Seth took you through has been amazing. I think everybody has a different point of view on taking audit classes. Mine has been pretty focused. So as I had mentioned, that one pivotal audit class I had on crime prevention was obviously key for me, but I have mostly focused on the core and not taken a lot of audit classes because I wanted to spend my time really working with my advisors and taking advantage of the other components and being free to sort of do a lot of really interesting things across the university that LSI has teed up for us too. So I found it all great, but also like valuable to pick and choose what I've wanted to do.
And Jeff, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, I similar to Wendy, the core courses have been amazingly eye-opening. I don't think I was expecting the type of learning, even as Seth alluded to, that came from some of the classes. And even though I wasn't new to the classroom, I completed a master's degree in 21. Being in a classroom with this cohort has changed the way I've learned and actually changed my appreciation for how others learn and what others have to offer. And the connectivity between the material and leadership, the material and self-discovery, along with the practical core curriculum that we have, has just been an amazing combination of things that actually I wasn't expecting stepping into this. So it's far exceeded expectations. Similar to Wendy, I haven't put an extreme amount of focus on audited courses. I've also kind of been exploring, and I love to connect and I love to network. And once I hit stride with my purpose plan, that's really what I was focused on. So not only at the university, within the cohort, through connections within the cohort, but also outside within the Chicago community, using my mentor to connect me to others in the community. So really have been taking advantage of that. And again, I think that's something that we should continue to underline, is that community that's being created both internally here at the university within the cohort and externally has been phenomenal. And as long as you use it in the right way, it's going to really accelerate what you want to do from a purpose plan standpoint.
One more question, because both of you mentioned advisors. Can you just talk about the role of these 3 next chapter advisors, the executive coach, the academic advisor, and the mentor in kind of shaping your experience?
I mean, I'll highlight it, and maybe Wendy, you want to highlight one. I was just going to highlight my mentor, because it was actually the first time in my life that I've actually had a mentor. And so it's been an interesting experience, but a very rewarding experience. And I will say, from just the outside perspective of providing feedback on the purpose plan, has been invaluable and has actually helped shape directionally some things that I wasn't thinking about. And I needed that perspective. And again, it was kind of unexpected that I was going to get that perspective, but that has probably been one of the more valuable relationships out of the 3 that I've had through LSI. My coach has been great as well, but I've worked with other coaches throughout my career. I love doing that, but it's really the mentor that has kind of helped shape the direction of where I'm going from a purpose plan standpoint and provided invaluable feedback.
Wendy, anything to
I mean,
add?
yeah, for me, I would just say that I have spent a lot of time and have sort of gone all in with all 3 of my advisors, and have found it really, really helpful and rewarding. So on the coach, I've had coaches too, but this coach has been super helpful because she's got sort of a methodology for looking at how you can pivot in your career. And that was really helpful, particularly on the front end of the LSI journey. And it really helped me crystallize my path. I'm the academic advisor. I mean, I feel really lucky because there is this leader, Jens Ludwig, who's running the crime lab, and has been so helpful in helping me really think through where there could be value in my purpose plan and the field. And then on a mentor relationship basis, also feel super lucky because not only is she helping and guiding me, she's sort of a model. I mean, she's done in her career things like I'm talking about going to do in the purpose plan. And so it's super helpful, supportive, encouraging to work with her on that every step of the way. So it's been a big part of the LSI journey for me, and very, very rewarding.
Diana, maybe we can just bring you in here. Anything on the elements of the journey that you just want to double down on and, describe further as the director that you see are real strengths of the experience?
Yeah, I mean, this is in alignment with what Jeff and Wendy have said, but I think, in reflecting on this first year and kind of synthesizing lessons we've learned, I think what we're really seeing is that there is a sweet spot across these elements in having a shared learning journey, in opportunities for kind of collective and communal engagement that is balanced with a lot of space for self-direction and customization based on each individual's very unique and distinct learning objectives for the program. And I think another thing we feel confident about leaving this year is that those 3 learning pillars are the right container for this program, right? That creates unification across the core courses, across the purpose plan development, and across the advising. But it also leaves quite a bit of space, and both Wendy and Jeff alluded to this, to allow our fellows to kind of gravitate towards different parts of those pillars based on their process and really what they're, is really sparking them and kind of igniting their own ideas. And so we think that like blend has been really, really effective. And then, the other thing I'll say is that across the elements, and I think you heard this, we're working on striking the right interplay between the kind of traditional academics, which we think the university does extremely, extremely well, right? That is really one of our strengths as an institution. It's deeply a part of our identity. There are lots of jokes here about, people say, typically you would say, like, how does it work in practice? And here we say, how does it work in theory? And I think that's part of who we are and part of what we can really offer to a group of leaders like this. But we want to balance that again with opportunities for fellows to really see how this work gets done on the ground, to engage with community leaders on the South Side of Chicago, to learn from social impact practitioners and organizational models that really are at the forefront of driving change forward. And so we're continuing to think of ways to iterate and refine on that measure. And this inaugural class has been instrumental in helping us think through ways we can do that more effectively. But I would just say on the whole, those are some of the aspects of, how the elements really intersect and serve one another, that have seemed to be really, really effective this year.
Well, so with that, I'm going to share my screen one more time. I'll just share the other way that many people think of the University of Chicago, which is we've long been known as the place where fun comes to die. But the LSI Fellows are a big part of retiring that identity because they are having a lot of fun this year alongside their purpose. So let's jump quickly into selection. And again, we do have individual counseling available for people that want to go further and talk about whether or not you should become candidates. We are looking for people that have 2 decades of senior levelship experience, a track record of significant accomplishment. Something that is core to the university is a willingness to engage in deep, rigorous, and respectful open exchange. We want you to be in conflict with views that you disagree with here. It is something we are very proud of. It is something that we believe in passionately, and we think everyone grows when they are exposed to views that are different because it allows us to think again about the way that we look at the world. And one of the beauties of the cohort is because of the diversity of the cohort, you are going to hear from people that have different lived experiences and different outlooks. And we think that will strengthen your ability to interpret your next chapter and then to activate it. You should have a proven commitment to society. There are people that are in the current cohort who have had incredible leadership in their lives. And because of sometimes quick accumulation of roles, they haven't had a chance to necessarily prove that commitment with a huge role or, being board president or being in a strategic philanthropy role. And so we understand that may take very different forms. And often in the writing and in your interview, you can expose that even if it's not core to your current resume. And then finally, a compelling vision for how participation in LSI, because we are limited in the number of slots, can really help you to activate a meaningful next chapter. There's 3 steps to the process. Step 1 is intentionally meant to allow you to see if you are a potential eligible candidate. All you have to do to get started is submit your resume or professional biography. We then review it. And if you are in the realm of eligibility, meaning we think there is, based on that initial set of information, a realistic possibility of your being selected for the LSI Fellowship, then we invite you to fill out a full application. And then that's where you have a lot more to do in terms of multiple essays and references and really showing what you plan to do in this next chapter. And then finally, you have an interview. And the interview is really important to us because, as Diana mentioned, cohort composition is really the #1 value. And so we spend a lot of time really in those interviews understanding what are you seeking in this next chapter, and are you able to bring a humility and an approach that would not only help you, but that would help the entire cohort. And having just gone through this inaugural cohort, we've become even more convinced that that is actually the most important element of the process, because having people that are on the shared mission together, but coming from different lenses and approaches, really is the hallmark of what makes the secret sauce, so to speak, of the initiative. We do want to make sure we acknowledge that the cost of this is a very significant investment. So this is a big time investment being in Hyde Park for the academic year. It also is at the level of tuition of a graduate program here. So $77,500 for the upcoming year. That said, we do offer very aggressive financial assistance because we do want to make sure this is accessible to people that have had accomplishment in different spheres, including the social and governmental sectors. And with that, I'm going to take down my screen and we are open to your questions. There are a couple different ways you can ask. You can use the reactions tab at the bottom to raise your hand and we'll call on you. You can just unmute and shout out, or you can use the chat function to put your question into the chat. So we're open for questions and we'll await the first one in whatever format makes the most sense to you. Cheryl, get us started.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing. It was very inspirational and delightful to hear your stories. Submit a resume to whom exactly, Seth?
That is a great question. So I will put in the chat right now on the website where you submit that. But it is the Begin Candidacy button, and it is going in the chat right now for those who want to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, we have one from Dorian. So how long will it be from when we submit our candidacy until we would be requested to complete a full application? Diana, do you want to take that?
Sure. So at present, we're technically in what we refer to as rolling admissions. And so essentially we review new candidacies on a 3-week timetable. And our most recent review was last Friday. So we're sort of in a batch of reviewing now, and our next one will be May 3rd. But so essentially that's all to say that you can expect to hear back no longer than 3 weeks from submitting your candidacy to being, to the results of that submission.
We have a question about how one involves their spouse in the journey. And we do want to emphasize that we have a lot of opportunities for partners to participate in, for example, the orientation. Both Jeff and Wendy, I believe both of you were on the London trip. And I don't know, I know many people brought their partners, so it may have been that both of you did as well. Do each of you want to talk to how you've involved your partners in your respective cases?
Yeah, so my husband Leon came with on the London trip. He's very involved in my purpose plan, I can tell you, which is exciting. So that's been a co-journey on that. And, he's come to some things. And now what's going on is there's a lot of social activities going on in the cohort. And so he's come to a lot of different just social gatherings and visiting people's houses. And he's sort of busy, so he hasn't been able to come to the immersion day programs or things like that, but many spouses do, I would say. So
thanks, Wendy. Yeah, Jeff, do you want to share anything about Emily's involvement?
Yeah, I mean, my wife, Emily, she is actually co-piloting, similar to what Wendy just said, on my purpose plan. So we're walking side by side on building what we're building. And that has been honestly another unexpected gift, because once I came back with the concept and started building it out, she jumped right in and wanted to be involved. So it's something that is going to be great to be involved in together.
I just want to acknowledge that, Jeff and Wendy are examples of people that have partners and have involved them. We also have a number of people, though, who may be single, and there's definitely community here for that, too. So I just want to acknowledge that we are inclusive of partners, but there's also not a sense that you need to have one in order to be part. And there is, an intention on our end to make sure that as we build composition, even that is part of what we ensure, with everyone feeling included and part of the community. So
And if I could just
Yeah,
quickly
go for it,
add,
Dan.
Jeff and Wendy mentioned some of the kind of larger visibility points that family members can have into the LSI learning journey. But I'll just offer that I've been struck at some of the small ways that fellows are reflecting, sharing with their family, just doing some of the readings together, or, we have a lot of different workshops throughout the years, that some of which involve some creative exercises that people are taking home and sort of saying, look at this product I made, and how does this make you think about me? And we have people sharing their papers with their adult children or their not so adult children. And so I do think there are lots of ways to bring family members in. And I think that has been a really enriching part for our fellows to be able to kind of showcase those features and have their family be iteratively a part of this.
And then there's a question about whether this is a full-time 1-year commitment. And maybe I'll just briefly say that we have set this up to be as in tune with your lives as possible. We did go in person and full-time, in the sense that it is 5 courses that you're auditing each quarter, the 3 core and up to 2 audits. That said, we've scheduled the curriculum Monday to Wednesday so that people who have corporate board commitments or other leadership roles can be out Thursday to Sunday where needed. And we've also got 10 weeks over 3 quarters, 10 weeks per quarter, 3 quarters. So it's in total, for example, 60 nights that you absolutely need to be in Hyde Park. And so it's this kind of flexibility where many people are here every day and they are part of the university community the entire academic year. But there are some people that are, for example, one person who's still living in Annapolis and coming out and here Monday to Wednesday and has made that work. Diana, anything to add? And then Wendy and Jeff, as people who also have other commitments, do you want to just talk about what it's like to really have this as likely the anchor this year, but not the sole activity of your lives?
Yeah, I mean, I would just jump in and say, I think that's a good way of putting it. As anchor, I think it can take the lion's share of your time. I've been involved in a number of different other projects and sitting on boards and different things, and I think that is very compatible with this. But you could spend absolutely all of your time doing this, and there would be a lot of reward in that. Sometimes, there's a lot more I'd even like to do if I weren't doing other projects and things, but I think it's all manageable. I think it would be hard to maybe be working full-time and doing this. That I think would be a challenge. Although we do have somebody in the cohort who's doing that, but I think that is a real juggle.
I will just add to that point that I was working full-time for the first 6-7 weeks of the program, and it was very difficult to balance. So while there are a few in the cohort who are balancing it, it's very difficult to do because this is an anchor commitment, as has been said.
Yeah, the last thing I'll just say is that I do think by virtue of the type of leader we hope to support, and with full understanding that most people coming into a program like this are going to have meaningful outside obligations that aren't necessarily static. I think that's been a big lesson for us this year, is that even allowing some degree of flexibility quarter over quarter, like in Jeff's example, his first quarter in the program looked very different because he was still working full time than it does now. And I think we've had others, who kind of came in, really had a lot of time, and then they had moments where they really had to refocus their attention elsewhere, and we were able to work with them to support their process and still have continuity within LSI while still enabling them to get as much as they could while meaningfully addressing those outside commitments. So that's, I think, something else that's been an asset for us this year.
I'm aware that we are coming up to time, and I want to be respectful of everyone. Let me just say briefly, in response to Harriet's question, that you do not need to have a plan before you get here. And indeed, people came in vastly different places, some with a plan, which has changed in many cases, and many just knowing they wanted to use the intellectual resources of the university to expand their horizons. To Jennifer's question, we are capping the next cohort at 25, and that is because we do find the intimacy of these cohorts to be critical to their success. And that came directly from the recommendation of this year's fellows, as we have had a really strong applicant pool and we wanted to know their thoughts. And then finally, to Nathaniel's question, that is a little bit larger, but the belief is that that still allows everyone to fit in one room and be in one group. And so that's how we ended up at that number of 25 as the next progression. Let me just say that we have availability after this meeting to talk to people that are interested. In addition to myself and Diana on the team, there is a woman, Sarah Wilson, who is the Assistant Director of Engagement, who specifically has one of those calendars you can just book time on directly. We'll make sure in the follow-up that we include her link, but we are also equally available and eager to talk to anyone that's interested. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you. This is an energizing program for all of us, and it's a joy that so many people are interested in learning more and that you want to do really meaningful things with your next chapters. Jeff and Wendy, thank you for being role models in our first year, and thank you all for being with us. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.